Andrew, welcome to Elixir Friends. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'm really excited. I haven't talked to you in a while. It's been at least a year, right? I guess.
Yeah, a little bit more than I think since the last Elixir, well, since the first Elixir Conf in Orlando.
Yeah.
Not this past year, but the year before.
Wait, right. 2023? That's when you went?
What year is it? Yes,
Yeah,
23.
right.
23. Yeah. There you go. Took me a second to figure out what year it is.
Yeah. Time's flying. I hear you. How have you been, man?
Good.
Yeah.
I can qualify that. I can also just end with like good. We're done.
I feel like that's the default answer in the States, right?
It really is, yes.
Everybody's like, good, I'm doing great. And it's like, how are you really? You know, it's this weird thing. But
and you usually have to ask 2 or 3 times before you get a real answer.
Yeah. I can be more precise, perhaps.
Yes, yeah. If you want to.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I'm curious. How has life been? I guess generally for you, in terms of how you doing. In terms of like, let's start with health, with life, with like, how you feeling?
Largely pretty well. This week has been a lot of travel, and so my sleep schedule is off. But that's is a consequence of rapidly approaching 40 and sleeping in beds that are not mine while traveling and all of that, right? And so it's just normal stuff. It'll all recover. But I've been, relative to a couple of years ago, when I was self-employed rather than like regularly employed, my health is feeling really solid.
Nice. That's good.
I play tennis about 15 hours a week.
What? 15 hours a week?
Yeah, 10 to 15.
Wow.
Kind of depends on the week.
That
mostly
is
in the like 5:30 to 7 a.m. range.
That's amazing. Is that normal? I've never played tennis, so I don't actually know if it's a normal like amount of tennis playing.
Tennis, it's on the high end of normal.
Okay.
For adults, it's on the high end of normal. I know people who are on the court a lot more than I am.
Wow.
Who are like not teaching professionals or something like that, but who are just like regular humans.
Yeah.
But I think tennis as a sport attracts some relatively intense folks.
Yeah.
The margin for error is just so small, right? Your racket is like, a couple of degrees difference is the difference between like hitting a good shot and hitting the back fence without it ever landing in the court.
Okay.
Or just a couple of milliseconds difference in your swing can be the difference between a good shot and a not good shot. And so it is attractive to folks like myself who are perhaps kind of tightly wound, type A. We're gonna get good at this thing. And to be very clear, I am not good at tennis. I am roughly 50th percentile.
Okay.
In terms of records, I'm incredibly average. But it's right. Andre Agassi wrote about this in his autobiography. Every once in a while, you hit the ball really, really well, and just like makes the perfect sound, flies in the perfect arc, and it's just it's great. It's great.
Super satisfying.
Yeah, it's so satisfying.
Interesting.
And so you get like one of those moments every couple of months, maybe.
Okay.
But if you hit enough balls, you get more of them.
Right. Fair.
So,
and you probably get them more frequently, right?
Than if I were playing less often. Yeah.
Right.
So,
how long have you been playing tennis?
About 2 years, a little bit. 2 years and a couple of months.
Interesting. Is this something you did before? Like
in college, really poorly.
Okay.
I kind of picked it up, batted balls around with friends, and was just like incredibly mediocre at it.
Okay.
As opposed to like incredibly average. But
now you're incredibly average, an incredible average player, I would say.
Yeah, and so but it's just so when I stopped being self-employed, got a real job. I went from working long hours largely by myself. I started my own consultancy about 3 months into the pandemic when everything was closing down.
Was this in 2023 when I met you? You were you doing it self-employed?
No,
No.
that point I was done for. It was about a year and a half out
Okay.
from being self-employed.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so I was working a lot. I was not
Healthy.
When I had a client who, yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah,
It's not.
And this was like during the pandemic. We were like at home,
Yeah.
with a small child, just like trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
Especially in the very, very early phases when it was like, who even knows what's going on?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And so, and all of our all of our normal rhythms were completely disrupted. All of our normal routines were completely disrupted. And I just threw myself into work. And so when I've got somebody who comes to me and says, "Hey, I have a problem. I've got a budget. Let's see what we can figure out."
Yeah.
Like those are cases where I'm like, "Yeah, let's go. This is awesome."
Right.
But I never figured out like sales.
Yeah.
Really,
Sales
like
is hard.
prospecting.
Yeah.
It had some good word of mouth referrals, but just never didn't figure out how to do like the sales and the prospecting very well. I know folks who do it well.
Yeah.
I wish I knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Fair.
In a way that I could repeat, but I just wasn't very good at it. And so I was working ridiculous hours, was just sitting at my desk all the time. I wasn't sleeping. I was just not in great health. So anyway, decided to get out of that.
Okay.
Got a real job. And then caught COVID right away.
No.
It just like completely wrecked my short-term memory.
Oh no.
And so it'd be like, so I'd stand up and be like, oh man, what was I going to do?
Oh gosh.
What was I going to do? And so it's completely wrecked like my my attention span, my short-term memory, all of that for a bit.
Was this after you got a full-time job, or was this before?
Mm-hmm. It was right after.
Okay.
It was like a month.
Okay.
Month and a half after.
Gotcha.
And so it was it was fortunate that there weren't any other big health effects, but like in coming out of it, it was just like, man, I need to get out and move my body. I need to like go be a social person in the world again.
Yeah.
Let's go do things. And so and just like get to where it felt good to be like a person moving through space and time.
Yeah. It's weird because I totally understand what you're saying, because I am not in a healthy space. I think I haven't been. I'm a little bit better, but it's it's sort of a different story. But go ahead. So yeah. And so that's why you got into tennis?
Yeah, well, it's just like, because also when I was self-employed, I stopped having hobbies.
Yeah, because everything's about the job, right?
Yeah, it was just like, I need to find more prospects because this contract is ending. I need to deliver on this contract faster in order to like build the revenue, in order to have time to go find more prospects.
Yeah.
Or because I made promises to clients or whatever, and so it was just any realistic. I mean, pretty much every spare moment.
Yeah.
Was like I was at my desk working.
Okay.
Or doing the work around the work, sending the invoices, following up on emails, things like that. And just wasn't like out in the world living.
Yeah.
And then that was exacerbated by like, the first year or so that I was self-employed was like the height of the pandemic before the vaccines were available.
It's the work. Yeah. It heightens.
And so all of that was exacerbated.
Right.
And so, folks that I normally like would have seen out in the world, well, they moved away. Or we just like couldn't see each other for safety reasons, or any of that. Not like someone's going to get stabbed for safety reasons, but
the COVID
immunocompromised.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And at the beginning of COVID, nobody knew exactly what you need to do or how far you needed to be. I remember like even grocery delivery was like a weird thing, right? All this stuff. It was just
And so we so I was sitting there post having COVID, had a job again. My bosses, the launch scout, my bosses are really good about like, you're going to work about 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
40 and a half. Yeah, sure. 39 and a half. Yeah, sure. Beyond those, it's like, probably we need to make an adjustment. And so they gave me talkings to, early on, like, you were billing too much. Stop it. Which is rare in the hourly consulting world.
Yeah.
It's super rare, and I'm glad they did. But that was, but but it was rare. And so it's like, I have all of this time. I don't have to worry about sales. I just have to worry about delivering on like the project that I'm on.
Yeah.
And so I had all this like space. I didn't know what to do with it. And so then the question was, well, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
What seems enjoyable? What seems fun? And so I looked at a couple of things. I was like, yeah, I could sign up for a motorcycle course, learn how to ride a motorcycle, or go play Magic the Gathering or something, which
Sure.
is which I did in middle school. And I was like, what? It was just like, what seems fun anymore?
Yeah.
And then I was like, I had a lot of fun with tennis. And for my 20s, when I was working as like an artist, playing tennis was just it just wasn't economically accessible to like go take lessons.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was just like trying to pay rent.
Yeah. Yep.
There's paying rent, paid rent every month, but the luxury of like taking a tennis lesson was not
there.
Was not the right choice.
Yeah. It was not the financially responsible thing. Yeah.
It wasn't the right choice.
Yeah.
But there's a great nonprofit tennis center here.
Okay.
They run in coordination with the city, and it's still not accessible to everybody, but they do as a software developer, we do have certain means, and they do a really good job of like trying to get new folks into the game. So signed up for lessons, made friends, got involved in leagues.
Nice.
Got a lot healthier.
Yeah. You look good. Like I don't know why I have this maybe I don't know. I have a vague memory, but you look really good. In shape.
I'm in much better shape.
Yeah.
Than I was in much better shape when you and I were together than I was like 18 months prior, and I'm in a lot better shape now than I was then.
Nice.
And so it's just like feeling healthy and well hydrated.
Dude, that's awesome.
And found a group of similarly intense middle-aged folks who want to go play tennis at 5:30 a.m. with me.
It's amazing. It's amazing, and it's so relatable to me. You said you're fast approaching 40. I'm 30. How old am I? 36, I think. 36? Maybe 37? 36? It's bad that I don't know my age. But anyway, I'm around there.
Well, because you don't get asked as much these days, as opposed to like, you look like an elementary school student. How old are you? What grade are you in?
Yeah.
It's like every month somebody's going to ask you that. Whereas now, it's not as often.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I'm 36 or turning 36 or turning 37. It's one of those. Don't judge me. Don't judge me, people. No, but it's interesting. And I do consulting alone, my own stuff. I try to limit my hours. You said you have a kiddo?
I do.
You have one?
Yeah, I've got an 8-year-old. And she's really cool.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, 8-year-old girls are cool.
Do you have kids?
I have three. A 7-year-old girl, a 5-year-old son, and soon to be 2-year-old son as well. So three little kids. But anyway, I was just gonna say that forces me to not work insane hours. Because I think if I didn't have kids, I mean, it's what happens to me. If I have a spare minute, I actually don't know what to do anymore, other than like, I should go solve this issue in open source, or do this other thing, or like
go record a new Elixir stream video.
Yeah, exactly.
Those have been great, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, but it's like that. It's like, oh man, I need to create one because I need to, I don't want to like miss a week or whatever. And so all this stuff, and but I really the health part is so important, and it's like as soon as when you were talking, I don't know if you saw, I started cracking my back. I'm like, man, I need to at least stand straight. Anyway, I'm standing right now. I'm trying to stand more, but I like the tennis thing. I want to get back into soccer. Like I said, I never played tennis. I played soccer and volleyball in my life, like recreationally. I never played any, not seriously, but I need to get into that. And I've been trying to find pick up soccer, but I can't, it's so hard to find because I don't know. I don't even know where to find it. It's so this weird thing as you get older that like making friends, like
it gets so much harder.
It's so bizarre. It's like so bizarre. It's like, how was this so easy? And of course, it's because you went to school and met friends at school or whatever, and all this.
I mean, it's proximity and time.
Yep, exactly.
It
really is. but I don't know why. But anyway, it's encouraging to hear you say this. I'm like, yeah, there's
Mm-hmm.
you just got to do it. You just got to go find the thing. I like the idea of like finding a more structured, like I don't know if lessons, but like maybe I should just like I've been trying to find pickup soccer, but maybe I should go find a actual
like a rec league or something.
yeah, exactly, a rec league.
Yeah.
That's what they call them, right? So like something like that. That might make sense. So I can actually get out and play.
Yeah. Well, the thing that so I stopped playing tennis in my 20s because my regular tennis partners they all moved away.
Yeah, that's another thing.
They had babies. They became doctors. They moved to other cities for jobs and whatever.
Yeah.
I was working a billion hours, and so my schedule was like weirdly unflexible at times. And so, and I didn't know where to go to meet other tennis players.
Yeah, that's the
right?
thing.
Because you can't just like walk onto a court and be like, "Hey, what's up?
Y'all want to play?" Yeah.
Yeah.
Ironically,
want to play trucks with me? That works when you're like 4, but it doesn't work when you're like in your 30s.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, I like that.
Except it also does, and so
yeah. So how did you find this? For example, how did you find the organization or whatever to play tennis?
So the nice thing, so with the organization, like they're just here. They're like the place to play tennis in Lincoln.
Yeah.
And they're
Lincoln, where are you?
Nebraska.
You're in Nebraska? Lincoln, Nebraska?
Right.
Okay, cool.
Middle of the dang country, yeah.
Nice. I like it.
And it's a good city. And so it's the place to play. They host college tournaments, they host high school tournaments, they host junior tournaments. They're about half a mile from where my in-laws live.
Okay.
So I knew that they were there. And it was just like, I've got a little bit of disposable income. My kid is not putting herself in mortal danger literally all the time.
Yeah.
Because she's 6, right? You can leave, like, a 6-year-old can sit and do stuff.
Yeah. Oh, man. Huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
From, like, even 2 years before that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now she's 8, and I can, like, not yet old enough, like, to be left home alone.
No, yeah.
But old enough that, like, if I'm doing something outside, I don't need to make her come out with me. I just need to, like, I'm going to be outside. Please don't start any fires. And then she'd be like, why would I start a fire?
Right.
That's a ridiculous idea. Why would I do that? You keep saying that, but why would I do it?
It's just sensible. I see. You have a good, yeah. My daughter,
she's a cookie.
Yeah.
And so with this organization, they had like beginner lessons, intermediate lessons. Where intermediate is like, I can hit all of the strokes, and now I'm going to learn how to play like a thing that looks like tennis. Yeah. And the beginner lessons are like, here is a forehand. We're going to try it a bunch of times until you get the ball in. And then we're going to do a bunch more until you get the ball in. And so, and the folks who sign up for those are like, it's all adults in this case. And the folks who signed up were a mix of like, my kids are old enough that I have time.
Yeah.
Or my kids are out of the house, or my daughter signed up for her high school's tennis team, and I thought it'd be fun to be able to hit the ball with her, so I'm signing up for this too. Things like that. Or usually couples in their early to mid 20s.
Okay. Who
are like, we want a fun thing to do together.
Yeah. They have too much time. Yes.
Right. And so, but it was a nice mix of folks, and so through through the group classes, met some folks who then wanted to start a league team, and then the league teams, they're organized by skill level.
Okay.
And so you've got like person who played in high school, went to the state tournament, won a medal, played a little bit in college before getting injured. Now it's back 15 years later playing recreationally. Against somebody like me, that's not going to be fun for either of us.
Right. Yeah.
It's just not. And so it's grouped more or less by like standard deviations.
Okay.
So like your lowest competitive grouping is like your 28th or 32nd through like 50th percentile. And then it's like 50th through 70th percentile. It's like there's secret math behind the scenes. And so it doesn't
I was going to ask, how do
your
they
actual percentile.
How do they even figure out? You don't know your own?
Mm-hmm.
Or you
it's just like a rough guess.
Gotcha. Okay.
Rough guess based on so you're grouped into ratings, and your ratings go up by 0.5. So right now I'm a 3.5 player. 2.5 is can hit all of the strokes, knows the rules, about it.
Okay.
3.0 is can beat a 2.5 player pretty easily.
Okay.
3.5 is can beat a 3.0 player pretty easily.
Gotcha.
And then 4.0 is can beat a 3.5 player. And so it all like you have there's like a secret number that you get
Okay.
where nobody knows it except for
Okay.
like the
The
USTA.
organizing. Gotcha.
But then that determines what grouping you're in, and then the grouping you're in, your matches against other players with secret numbers, then they expect and how you do relative to the expected outcome.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Oh.
So it's kind of like an ELO almost.
What's an ELO?
It's named after somebody. It's like your chess rating, where or like your if you played online competitive games like an MMR, it's just like a number that assigns like that predicts the margin of victory.
Oh, cool.
And so
I'm sorry,
it's like it's a number that like
ELO rating system. Okay, so it doesn't stand
Yeah.
for something. It's just literally called ELO.
it might be named after the person who invented it.
Oh, creator Arpad ELO.
Oh, yeah, that would explain it.
Hungarian American physics professor. Gotcha. Okay.
And
Sorry.
so it, but it's just like assigns like win probability, or it predicts a win probability, or predicts like margin of victory in games where you have a margin of victory.
Okay.
And then with the groupings, ideally what happens is most matches you're against somebody where you're going to have a decent enough match.
Okay.
Right. So I might be against somebody who's, meaningfully better. They're going to win 70 or 80% of the time if we play, or 90%. But it's going to be close enough that at the end of it, I'm not like, wow, I should just hang up my racket. And instead thinking, okay, I got some stuff to work on and I can get closer.
Gotcha.
As opposed to like if I stepped on court with somebody who like played in college, where it's not going to be close,
Right,
and it's going to be obvious.
How high does
everybody.
that rating go? You're like 3.5, right?
It goes up to 7.0.
Okay.
It goes up like 6 or 7, at which point the rating stops being meaningful because those are people who are playing professionally.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
In Nebraska, at least, competitive play goes up to 5.0, which I think is like played in college and won
Got it.
in college.
Okay.
Not like won a national championship level, but like won matches.
Yeah, which is a big difference. I know. Like when people played college, I would probably call semi-professionally, right? In the States, it's probably like, it's a big deal. It's it's a significant, it's a very, very skilled individual in that category. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and I don't know what that would look like in soccer, but again, like the big thing that like just having a place to go gave was just there were other people. And so like joined a league team because some people I knew needed an extra player. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then when that team disbanded because the person who was running it like moved, got invited to join another league team by some folks I'd played before where we had a nice enough time on the court. So it's all largely super informal. Every once in a while you get like very intense people who are just like throwing temper tantrums over a match that has zero stakes.
Yeah.
And to be like zero, nothing interesting happens if I win, nothing interesting happens if I lose. There's like my secret number that like goes up or down, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Who knows?
But they're just
then
competitive. Maybe competitive might not be the right word because you can be competitive and not have that kind of reaction.
There's a difference between like being competitive and throwing a tantrum.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true.
Right, like I've had tough matches, so I'm like, man, it was kind of a bummer to lose that match.
Yeah.
My opponent played well. Still a little bit of a bummer. I make my notes of like things to work on. But there's a difference between like that and like I'm so upset that I'm going to smash my racket and then chuck it into the parking lot.
Yeah.
Which I don't do.
You've seen people do this?
Yeah. Yeah. There's
a
couple of repeat offenders, and it's just,
Yeah.
That's
one of the fears I have with soccer is because I have found before, not where we live now, but I found like pickup soccer groups with people that were awesome, and you play and it's friendly and all this stuff. But sometimes on occasion you go to pickup and you have one or two people who are really intense, and then it's like injury fest, right? Or not fest, but like you're so prone to injury because I'm out of shape. I'm just like getting out there, and they like do really hard tackles or something. And it's like, man, I'm just not. I don't want to. So anyway, but that's an excuse. That's an excuse, I think, that I'm
Well,
in my mind to, I just need to go and find a group. But
well, even with that, I mean, you want to have like comparable levels of intensity.
yeah,
Yeah, the
right.
like, I want to go out and be pushed to my limit versus I want to have a nice time with some friendly enough people, and then we're gonna
Yeah,
have a beer in the parking lot after.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
like those are different. Those are both valid and fine, but
yeah, yeah.
like,
They're different
but
for sure. Different.
but you can't have those people on the same pitch.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Without knowing what they're, yeah, you have to have
Right.
expectations, clear expectations as to what you're doing there, right? So that's that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Um, yeah, it's encouraging. I thank you. I'm encouraged. I will
Yeah.
go. I need to one of these days.
Hmm.
I will be playing soccer and I will report back gladly.
Please,
Yeah,
please do. And it's just, and so much of it is just like finding the people.
yeah. It really is. It's just that.
Um,
It's just that. It's incredibly. Again, it's just weird why it's so hard as an
mhm.
adult. I feel like,
Yeah, but it is.
but it is. It is. I don't get it. Um, I wanted to ask you about consulting. But
Mhm.
Launch Scout is consulting still, right?
Yep.
When you work 40 hours, you work. I mean, you said you're billing. Yeah, yeah. Do
Hmm.
you bill hourly still? Do you all bill hourly?
It varies.
Okay.
Most of our projects, I think, are hourly billing, where we've got there's a defined scope statement of work with like milestones and or key outcomes or however we want to describe them,
Okay.
and it usually will define a capped budget,
Okay.
where we'll say, you know, so the project I'm on right now, I think it's on a 12 budget week capped budget.
Okay.
And it's, we've got holidays in there, so it's not going to be like exactly 12 calendar weeks.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Like 12 budget weeks where we've got kind of a minimum set of outcomes that we need to hit in order for the project to even be worth it. And
Okay.
so and we just kicked this off Monday.
Okay.
And so there's a minimum set of outcomes that we need to be able to hit for the project to be worth it. And so my first task right now is just like, how feasible is that? Right? I think it's pretty feasible from what I can tell.
Do,
Um,
are you just now determining this? Like, did you already
um,
sold the project?
we sold the project,
Okay.
and with this particular client, they have a decent tolerance for experiments and a
Okay.
decent risk tolerance. So they'd be really bummed out if 11 weeks in we said, we don't think we can do it.
Right.
But if we said a week and a half in, here's a big obstacle, how do we do? Does it mean we need to shift to a different project? Does it mean, or do we need to like really dig into this? They're not going to be upset about that.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
other and they've got a big existing like legacy code base that we're working within, and like 20 or more years of like accumulated just technical stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Most of our work though is relatively greenfield,
Yeah.
or
Nice.
if it isn't greenfield, is most of our work is relatively greenfield, I'll
Yeah.
say.
Or like greenfield
uh,
adjacent, like maybe a new
mhm,
thing for an existing business kind of thing or something like that.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And in a lot of cases, we were the ones who who built like the first iteration of the application.
Oh,
Then
cool.
the client comes back, some number of months later and says, "Hey, we're going to add on to it." And so
Repeat.
it's like, I mean, as soon as you like ship it to prod, it becomes legacy code.
Right. Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but
It's absolutely true. Yeah.
um, but it's greenfield adjacent
Sure.
in most
Yeah. Yeah.
cases, I would say. We've got a couple of like maintenance projects where we've got a stream of like minor fixes and updates, and those are also usually hourly billed, and we just have a kind of usually a monthly cap
Okay.
where the client will say, "Here's a list of stuff, get to it when you can." And then we just don't exceed the budget for the month.
Interesting.
Um, and
Do
so we've
you,
got. Go ahead. Sorry.
sorry. Do you work with one client at a time, or might you be working with like multiple clients?
I
Filling
usually so the
hours.
projects that I'm on, I work with one client at a time.
Okay.
Because I'm typically in the like the team lead seat for
I got you.
usually our more complex projects.
Okay.
Um, with my with our maintenance, with more of our maintenance things, then whoever's on the bench, where they're not like on a dedicated project, they'll just kind of bop between the different
Gotcha.
maintenance projects.
Interesting.
So that person usually rotates, kind of just as projects reach their natural conclusions.
Okay.
Um, through sheer coincidence, I haven't been on the bench in like a year and a half.
Yeah, yeah.
Just things have lined up that way,
Yep. No, I
rather
get
than
that.
anything specifically that I'm doing. So I haven't gotten the chance to do my maintenance, rotation. But yeah, so it works out pretty decently. So getting back to your question, like we do sometimes sell flat rate projects, but those are typically like our more greenfield. We're pretty sure that we know what the complicating factors are going to be.
When you say
With
flat rate, you mean like fixed
fixed bid,
rate?
yeah, sorry,
Gotcha,
fixed
gotcha.
bid.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
gotcha, gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
fixed bid.
Interesting.
My bosses are experimenting with that a little bit. I don't. The heuristic that seems to exist is we go fixed bid if we're very confident that we can get the work done
Sure.
in the timeline. Otherwise, we go if we're not sure what the actual complexity is probably going to be, or if we're
Yeah.
not sure what the actual scope is going to be, we'll usually go hourly.
Yeah.
But they do we
Yeah.
do a pretty thorough job of discovery early in projects. And so what'll usually happen is a client will come to us with, we have an idea, we have a budget, and then we'll do the user story mapping and some UI mockups. It's like wireframes, nothing super high fidelity in most cases, unless they specifically ask for it.
Sure.
And mapping out the key workflows and like the event storming, user story mapping, or any of a million different mapping
Sure.
techniques.
Sure. Okay.
And then what that'll end up with is an artifact whose some sort of artifact, some sort of documentation that then, if this potential client wanted, they could go take to another dev shop, and sometimes they do.
Yeah. Interesting.
Um,
Do you charge for that discovery phase?
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
How long is it, and who's involved?
It's usually, from our perspective, it usually ends up being about 2 weeks long.
Okay.
From the client's perspective, it is like a couple of days of doing like the active story mapping, moving sticky notes around on the board, looking at wireframes and modifying them, and then some waiting while we compile our artifacts.
Gotcha.
And with that too would come like, here's what we think it would cost to build it.
Got it.
Here are the complicating factors. Here are the questions that you'll need to find a vendor for this. You'll need to find a vendor for that. We can help you. You can identify one if you already have a payment processor that you're engaged with, or an email sender, or any of the other like
things.
SaaS vendors that we build integrations with very regularly. And so, but and so we so we do. It ends up being about a 2-week process.
Okay.
Where usually what'll happen is one of our technical leads, so somebody like me or you, would be sitting in there as like the engineering voice, and then usually one of our designers is in there as well.
Okay.
Along with, in some cases, one of the executives, like our president or COO, or the heads of engineering or design. We only have 4 executives. Okay. We're not a very large organization.
How many people are in Launch Scout now?
15 or 16, I think.
Oh, really? It's okay. I had you in 40 or 50 for some reason.
There's a minute before my time where I think they were up to about 40.
Okay.
We were running, like, basically staffing entire departments for certain clients.
Gotcha.
And then about a year ago, we did some layoffs, and I think we went from low to mid 20s down to, we did some layoffs and had some people who just left for other positions. And then went down to, I think 15 or 16. I'd have to count, but gotcha. I think that's where the number is right now.
I see. Yeah, I feel like that's a golden, like between 15 and 20, I feel like it's a golden size for a consulting company. The bigger, like as you grow beyond that, I feel like there's probably with all kinds of companies, but for some reason consulting, it feels like there's just a whole other host of problems.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't need to expand on that, but it's
there's so much more overhead, and like, yes, you need to sell a lot more in order to keep that many people occupied and engaged.
It's wild.
You need to more directly supervise and manage.
Yeah.
Because at that point, with 15 people, 2 leaders who have management in their portfolio
Right.
Can manage and supervise 15 people.
Yep.
Well enough.
For sure. Yeah.
Well enough. As opposed to 40, like at that point, you just need engineering managers.
Yeah.
You need someone who's dedicated managers and dedicated project managers and dedicated like folks who are just responsible for making sure that everything happens like in the same way, so that because at 40 people, the likelihood that somebody's going to leave this year is way higher.
Right.
Just the law of averages, or something like that. I don't know. I'm probably butchering the math there. And so you need to be, or the likelihood that somebody's going to be on vacation at any given time, and so like the plugging and rearranging, the likelihood that it's just there's so many more moving parts.
Yeah, that shuffle of like you're always either looking for like you have too many projects and you need to like you're trying to find people to staff them, or you have too many people, which is even the worst problem is you have too many people, not enough projects, and then you have like that burn rate is high, right? Like every week that people don't work is shockingly high. Yeah.
It is, and it's easier to absorb like one person on the bench when you've got 40 people on staff.
Sure.
But it's so much harder to absorb. Like, well, 2 of our projects ended. We don't have, and our next project doesn't start for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. You're absorbing 8 people for 6 weeks who are not going to be able to produce revenue.
Yeah.
They can do other like valuable things, but
you can feel
it. Cash reserves. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so direct. The hit is so direct. It feels. Yeah. No, I agree. Interesting. Thank you. So that's. I always like to ask a consultant because that's what I do. And I worked at a consulting company before. I used to work at ThoughtBot. And so we had an office that was about 20 people, but that was part of the larger organization, which is like maybe 100 people.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, there's always those issues. And like then you have like inter-office, like sometimes the other take the project. Anyway, it was all kind of a nightmare. But
well, I guess how do you bill? Do you do hourly billing? Do you do flat rate?
I do weekly billing.
Oh, nice.
So that's, I got that from most of the way I do consulting, I got from ThoughtBot. Like that's kind of, I like their style. So it's weekly billing. I do 4 days a week, or depending on the client, if they want me to be there 5 days, I'll probably like do 32 hours a week, something like that. Right. So and that's how I do the little videos and all this stuff. That's how I try not to do too much extra work outside of actual work hours. Right. And I intentionally have what ThoughtBot called investment days, and that's basically what I do. Investment time. But I like consulting. I like switching projects. I like meeting people. I like helping solve problems. That I find it fascinating. I definitely, the sales part is always the harder part. What you were saying before is like, how do you, like having a sales pipeline and all this stuff. I don't have a sales pipeline. I don't know. I mean, I think the videos probably will help. Like, but most of my clients come from network. Like that's just, like people who already knew me even before I started consulting or, so.
Right. Or like a referral from somebody who knows you.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. My current client was a referral from someone who knows me, and, and I hate it because I live in fear that, next time I won't be able to find a client. Like it's just one time. Like I just need one time where like, oh no, I can't find a client for 2 months. I'm going to go get a job, that kind of thing. So, but it's, I don't know. I like it. I still like it. Yeah. So we'll see.
What are your favorite kinds of projects to take on?
Honestly, I don't know. This is actually a bad thing, I think, because I think I should probably position myself better. Speaking of, it's called positioning, right? Yeah, positioning.
Yeah. Positioning, or like sometimes they hear it called niching, which is I don't like that verb as much. I like positioning better.
Yeah. Positioning, and there's definitely like, I'm niched down in that all my marketing stuff is Elixir focused, right? In Phoenix. So I'm like, in that sense, like, niched into a technology,
right? Or
positioned into a technology. I have done Rails projects while I've been consulting solo.
I mean, you're at ThoughtBot. You don't get to be at ThoughtBot without at some point interacting with Ruby and Rails.
Yeah.
So
But I don't know. I think I should position. I'm trying to figure out how to position myself
Mm-hmm.
better. And it's the problem is like I don't know what I want to. Let's if
Mm-hmm.
people say it feels restrictive, but it's not. Like you'll find better
Right.
clients. You'll find all these things, right? You read anything about positioning or niching down, you'll find the better clients. You'll find all these things. And but I don't know, man. I love greenfield projects. I do like that. I
Mm-hmm.
like
They're fun.
they're super fun. I love the end to end aspect of it. I'm always like,
Mm-hmm.
I was never like, I want to be the back end developer. Don't let me, I don't
Right.
want to talk to customers or anything. I'm the opposite. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I love being involved with product management. Like, often we don't, like at the beginning of a project, I'm like, we don't need a product manager. It's just like us and the CEO or whoever, the founder, we're working together. Like,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, and I love user interviews and like working with
Mm-hmm.
designers closely. I love working with
Yeah.
designers 'cause I love learning from designers. Like when you have good and Thoughtbot, and I think it's probably the same in LaunchGap. Like the
Mhm.
designers are not just people who like design mockups. They like
Right.
do some coding, which is HTML,
Mhm.
CSS, and stuff. But more importantly, I think they're like experienced in user design flows, like
Mm-hmm.
interviewing users and all that stuff. So I like to just be like a fly
Mhm.
on the wall and learn. And so I've learned a lot over the years.
Yeah.
And I like being sort of the whole aspect. So that's why I love Greenfield.
Mhm.
I love delivering value quickly, building something quick, iteratively, like customers feeling that value, like seeing that value come to life. There's something
Mhm.
really magical about that. And I like that. But sometimes those are shorter lived, right? It's
Mhm.
like, and it's hard actually. I don't know if this is hard for you all, but I don't know how the selling process goes, but many people come with their own money when they're doing
Right.
like a MVP. And I'm like,
Mhm.
there's a higher sensitivity to pricing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's their own money.
Mhm.
Unless it's like this is where I called it the greenfield adjacent, where you have a company that might have an existing product and
Mhm.
they're expanding into a new whatever. They're going to build a
Right.
new product, but this is an established company, so they have money.
Mhm.
It's a way different kind of
Right.
selling.
Yeah, like building a new suite of features or a companion product or something
Yeah,
like that, as opposed
yeah,
to.
exactly. They're expanding into an adjacent industry or
Mhm.
something, right? And
Yeah.
so you can help them build the first iteration of that, maybe with their team.
Mhm.
Um, so then but that's the hard part of greenfield for me is like selling that
Yeah.
because people are like, well, I have like, and so I think people also don't realize how expensive it is to build software if you want to build it
Mhm.
high quality custom software, right?
Right. Right.
So that's one thing. The other kind of projects that I love, I do love projects where I get to join a team. Typically, there's sort of like maybe mentoring component. That doesn't
Mhm.
have to be, but that's
Right.
part. Like I love that, and that I think that's why I do a lot of little videos and blogging, and all this stuff is constantly like sharing, right?
Mhm.
And often that is also like helpful to like people who might hire me, maybe like a CTO or a CEO, like they also want sort of like an input or like help making the
Mhm.
team more agile or helping the team, in a sort of
Right.
in a less like top down approach, but
Mhm.
more I like actually helping teams develop better practices,
Yeah.
right? That I love that kind of stuff, like
Mhm.
helping people. Like it's funny because it's not even really about coding, but it's
Mhm.
about everything that is around it, right? How a team functions, how you communicate, how the
Mhm.
meetings, organizations, like avoiding meetings, all this stuff. So helping the teams with all of that, and I actually like helping new companies also establish that kind of culture. So it's
Mhm.
again, I don't have a good position. I need to figure that
Yeah.
out.
I think it's so. The thing that I didn't hear you say, um, right? This isn't going to be an attack. I promise. Is
No, poke holes. This is good. This is good
no,
for me. I don't
gonna
have
poke so many holes here. Um, so what I didn't hear is I just want to show up, be told what to do. They
yeah,
give me a
no,
binder of UML diagrams.
right.
I work through it. Life is great. I clock out at 5 p.m. Clocking out at 5 p.m. actually is awesome. But the right, but there are people who want to work that way, and
Yeah,
this is not a criticism at all. There are
yeah,
times in my life where I've been like, yeah, please. I
right.
don't want to make decisions. I just
Yeah,
want to
it's
like
true.
do my thing.
Yeah,
I had a
yeah.
warehouse job in college where my job was like I picked up books and then I moved them to other shelves. Um,
Yeah.
And sometimes I put them like on a cart and rolled them to other shelves, and it
Wow.
was awesome.
Yeah.
I did. At that time, I was writing. I was doing a lot of writing. I did some of my best writing that year.
Oh.
Or that summer.
Okay.
Because my job required the only thinking was just like
Move box. Move thing.
and avoiding injury.
Yeah.
Um, truly.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, like nothing else. And so I had all these extra brain cycles that I could do other
Yeah.
things with. And so like that was awesome for that
Yeah.
time in my life. And so, but what you're talking about is like you want to get in there, like you want to make some sort of impact,
Yeah. That's
and like have some sort of like useful, positive change beyond here's a chunk of code
yeah.
that I wrote
Exactly.
that someone else also could have written.
Yeah. It's not like it's definitely not to throw it over the wall, like give me some specs and I'll do it.
Yeah.
Like I actually like to help clients figure out, is this even the valuable thing to build for your customers, right? That kind of thing. And you nailed it spot on. It's like I like the impact. I like helping people. Like I want that helping them, not just like here's code that does kind of what you told me you wanted to do. Good luck. Like that's not
Right.
It's not really my jam. So
Yeah. And we are you're simpatico in that way, and that like those are the projects that I want to work on. Here is a hard problem that technical people, whichever the case might be, where if we succeed, it's going to be cool. It's going to be valuable to the client.
Yeah.
As opposed to, bro, we just need you to sit down and write some code. And I can just sit down and write some code. I can do that.
Yeah.
But those aren't the projects that I look for.
Yeah. And I like that too, actually. I do like sometimes just getting into code and refactoring and and like designing all this stuff. But I think for a project as a whole, I don't want that to be the sole component, because then I don't know. I like the human interaction. I like the solving problems kind of thing. So. Yeah. That's really good. I appreciate the analysis. I need to talk to more. Like we'll have to talk again. I like the analysis. But you mentioned something though that I'm curious if I can ask you. Before you said, but in your 20s you were trying to live the artist life, and you also mentioned that you were writing a lot when you were working at the other job.
Yeah.
What was this artist life? Tell me more, please.
Okay. Yeah. So from age 23 to 29 or so, I made my living as a poet and as a teacher of poetry. So as a classroom teacher, right? So I actually paid my rent by doing substitute teaching.
Okay.
And ACT and SAT tutoring, like I taught summer school.
Okay.
But I did those things because they meant that during the school year I could travel around the region and teach poetry workshops in middle and high schools. There's a surprising number of English and literature teachers who are just terrified of poetry. Whose experience of poetry is like, we use new critical theory and we analyze it. We find out what it means.
Okay.
Which sometimes is interesting, but also is just like, how do you even know sometimes? Right? It's only like 1 month through looking at this. Okay. But then the other piece was I got to travel around the country for some value of around the country doing readings and selling books.
This is amazing. So you do you have books? First of all, do you have books that you've written? Poetry books?
I've had like little like kind of self-printed chat books. Oh, I'd have to go figure out where they even are. To be honest, it's been.
You don't have them at Amazon?
No, it's been so many years.
Somewhere online that I can go buy them right now.
I can send you if I find the PDF, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
It's if you want. It's it's like anguished being in the 20s, or being in one's 20s. And to be clear, like most of that was actually me teaching, but it was like a very specific niche.
Yeah.
And then, but so my work generally picked up like around the school year. And then during the summers, I was like ACT and SAT tutoring, and saving up enough money that I could like continue paying rent throughout the year and like paying to repair my car and things like that. but and so my entry into software development then was we were running a region-wide slam poetry competition. Where slam poetry is the name sounds really violent, but it actually it's just a goofy name. What it is you it's a competitive format where you have 3 minutes to read an original composition that might or might not be particularly poetic.
Okay.
And then some strangers give you scores, and whoever has the best scores advances. And we all recognize that it's a deeply absurd, like a deeply absurd pastime, because who knows what they're scoring on, right? They're just like people from the audience who are not directly affiliated with any of the readers who are performing.
Okay.
So it could be literally anybody.
Are you reading your work or somebody else's?
Your own work.
Okay.
So it's your own work that you hopefully have prepared ahead of time, as opposed to just like scribbling it down before it's your turn. Who knows, right?
Sure. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, the muse hits you, then the muse hits you. You just got to roll with it. But then you, and so there's like competitive formats. So at the time, there are like national and international competitions for this.
Wow. Okay.
And those, to my knowledge, ceased existing 5 to 8 years ago. They were run by nonprofit organizations that were wildly mismanaging everything. That's in the style of nonprofit organizations, like super weird little niches that are largely ego governed.
Okay.
But bummer. But the yes, I would go compete in those sometimes, and it was. But anyway, so we were running a middle and high school tournament, mostly high schools. There were a couple of middle schools that got in across Nebraska, and then kind of the Omaha, Nebraska metro area.
Sure.
So it's schools from like just across the river in Iowa, where I supervised a team of 17 or so teaching artists who would travel around and do poetry with young people. And so I was responsible for like training and quality assurance and a bunch of logistics. And anyways, you kept track of this with a giant spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Originally, the executive director of the organization that I worked with, he and I worked really closely together. He would keep track of it all in a Corel WordPerfect document. And I said, Matt, these are numbers. Please put them in a spreadsheet. Instead of like updating the number and then using your calculator to update the other numbers, please stop. Put it in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And then, I had fiddled with like QBasic and whatnot when I was younger. My college roommate was a Ruby on Rails developer. Still is. And so I was like, I could build this in Rails. And then I didn't. But
oh no! What did you do?
We just continued the spreadsheet, and then I'd learned enough like Rails and whatnot. Then some Java through a course, and then later through in a wild turn of events, I got to be an adjunct instructor at the university in a intro to programming class.
Oh wow, cool!
Off of what was basically like a CS 101 level of computer science knowledge, but it was like a week before the semester is due to start. One of the other adjuncts had a family emergency or something like that. And the fellow who was in charge of this course was like, knew me from the poetry stuff, knew that I was a teacher.
This is amazing.
Knew that I'd been dabbling in software development.
Okay.
And was like, you're going to feel out of your depth here, but I've talked to a couple of grad students, and all they do is stand up there and like stare at their shoes and mumble.
Oh, wow.
Do you think you can pull this off? And I said, yeah, I don't know. I'll give it a try.
That's amazing. And it's because
let's see how badly we regret this.
You like it's so fascinating to me. Like, yeah, it's because you have the ability to speak. You've done all this stuff with poetry, and all of a sudden you do programming. That
I've been teaching, and so we had. I mean, it's just like if statements and loops and arithmetic and defining methods. Was all that. I mean, we did like a tiny bit of object-oriented stuff, and I knew enough about it.
Okay.
Going into the course that I could like catch up and figure out where I needed to be out of the course, like inheritance, polymorphism, and Liskov substitution, and all of that.
Yeah.
But we, so the first semester was like a gigantic whirlwind, scrambling as hard as I could to keep up.
You did this more than one semester?
I think 5 total semesters.
Wow. Okay.
They kept asking me back.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. I like. One day, I always think about it. Man, it'd be cool to be an adjunct.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's also a ton of work for not much money.
Yeah. It wouldn't be for the money. It would have to not be for the money.
Right. And without a whole lot of support. So the thing that made it successful for me was that at that point, I'd already been like making my living, between like poetry stuff, but mostly teaching for like 8 years. And so I was a skilled enough teacher that I had to like manage the grading load, manage the grade book, manage the classroom, present the material. Like I could do those things.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And so it was, it's like walking into a new programming project. Like if you already know Elixir and you're walking into a new code base, figuring out the rest of the code base isn't that bad most of the time.
Sure.
It can be, like, depending on how complex the domain is, and also.
But you have like a foundation,
right?
Yeah, you have a foundation, a scaffold, and also connections in your brain. Is how I think about it. There's things to attach to your brain. It's like so it's easier to. Yeah.
Right, as opposed to you're walking into a homebrew PHP project.
Yeah.
Where it might be beautifully written.
Still,
But I mean, I don't write PHP. Not even like a snarky way. I mean, like PHP powers 80% of the internet.
Sure.
I can read it.
Yeah.
I can't write it.
Yeah.
Without significant reliance on like reference materials. In the way where like with Ruby or Elixir,
sure.
I can just like sit down, bang out code. I'm going to look stuff up.
Right.
But I can build features.
Yeah.
And I don't have to be like, okay, I have a list. How do I iterate over the list?
Yeah, right. Even the basics, right? If you can't even do that, yeah. No, I hear you.
And it was the same with teaching, where I already knew how to like manage my grading load. I already knew how to manage, work with the classroom, deal with. It was college, so I didn't really have to deal with a whole lot of student behavior issues.
Yeah.
But I knew how to set expectations. I knew how to like walk into a room and be like, yes, you are all paying attention to me right now. Which is a skill that brand new adjuncts don't usually have.
Yeah, no, of course. The commanding a room, it's a completely
skill.
different thing. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And there are people. It's like my wife was an actor for a while, and so and she's great. She's so much cooler than I am. So much cooler than I am. But so she, like from when she was very young, has been able to walk into a room by sheer force of charisma, be like, yes.
Wow.
Here we are. We are together. I've created a space for you. And we're going to do this together.
Yeah.
So she could do that.
Interesting.
In a way that's really cool. And in a way that I had to work pretty hard to learn. But I have friends, I know, like, even just other adjuncts, where it's like, they'd ask me to, like, come sit down in their classes, just as, like, they knew I was a teacher. They're like, yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing here, man. And so you'd sit and be like, you don't know how to command a room yet. You don't know how to just, like, and I don't know how to teach that skill.
Oh man, I was about to ask you, how do you command a room? I was going to ask you because
so it's
so hard. I know there's so many bad professors. That's all I'm going to say. Like,
some of it is just like force of presence. Some of it is there's like things that you can do with your voice, and I have like a masculine sounding voice, so I know how to do it with my voice. I don't know how to do it with like a more feminine sounding voice.
Okay.
So we'd have to learn. I'd want to see more case studies of that.
Sure.
There are things that you can do just by like finding the right person in the room to make eye contact with.
Oh, interesting.
Or the right couple of people
who
to make eye contact with. Well, and I don't know how to identify, but it's like, so it'll be like the people who are, and you kind of get a sense of this. And I don't know how to describe it, but like walking into, so it's a substitute teacher for middle and high school students.
Okay.
And I was really good at it.
You did some real hard stuff. Oh my god!
It was actually so much fun, and I only had maybe 3 to 5 minutes of like actual student behavior that I needed to deal with, and the rest of it was just like normal. Hey, you're talking right now. Instead of doing the math assignment, please do the math assignment, then talk.
Yeah.
Right. Just normal, like benign redirections, or even if they didn't, like. No one's going to get hurt, as opposed to like the 3 to 5 minutes. We're like, there's going to be a fist fight in front of me right now unless I intervene. Kids who didn't even want to be in a fist fight, they were just like, neither of them wanted to be the first one to back down. I was like, I would give them the gift. I'd be like, please don't have a fist fight right now.
Separate, yeah.
I don't want to do any of the paperwork or any of like the blood cleanup. If you need to do a fist fight after school,
Oh my gosh.
you can do that. I will not stop you. You're off school grounds. I don't care. Right now, though, I need you to go to class because I don't want to clean up your blood. I don't want to write paperwork. I don't want to like do any of this. It is literally the last day of school. Please stop.
Oh my gosh.
Disperse. And so there's also some like just directness.
Yeah.
That you can get. But so anyways, like walking into a room, you get a sense of like who are the people who set the thermostat for the room.
Okay.
Kind of the emotional thermostat.
I wouldn't
Like,
even have thought. It makes total sense, but I wouldn't even have thought about. There's people like there's people.
Yeah.
Like now that you say it, I'm like, yeah, probably that makes sense. But I just never thought that. Yeah, you got to go find those people.
Right. Well, and think about like if you're watching your kids with other kids.
Yeah.
Like some kids are, and this is most kids, will like follow the lead sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Totally true. Yeah.
Right. Some kids will follow the lead literally whenever.
Yeah.
For any reason. Some kids will always take the lead.
Yeah.
And so, but like watching the like, but it's that middle group of like follow sometimes, lead sometimes. But even then, they like, and it isn't like a hierarchy, but there's like a gradient.
Yeah.
Of like who is leading the most, who is following the lead of this kid, but setting the lead for these other kids.
Yeah.
And you can see it. And it shifts. Like it's amorphous. It shifts. It's not static.
Yeah.
But you can see it. And so you find like, who are the ones who are like, where the other kids, the other students are like, or the other people in the room, like the other adults are looking to them.
Yeah.
You make eye contact with them and you're like, it is time. Everyone.
That's fascinating. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it takes practice. It takes most people don't get to practice.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, how would you practice? Like, how would you practice that?
Exactly. You don't, because you haven't had the reps, you haven't had the experience, you haven't, and even just someone telling you that, right? Like, who knows if I'm going to remember this the next time that I do this, but it makes total sense. Do you use this for presentations? Like when you do like Elixir Conf type of presentations?
I do.
Yeah.
I absolutely do.
Makes sense.
I will also use it. I do trainings, even when we do meetings. It was the other day. Earlier this week, I was in Ohio doing our plant kickoff. And we like took we've been in the meeting for, 75, 80 minutes. And it's like, everyone needs a chance to like stretch their legs, get some water, use the restroom, just be people with bodies. We came back in, there's kind of like idle side conversations, and then just being able to do, okay, so we're all back, and then eyes.
Yeah.
Just like that. And it's just, it's harder to do on video calls.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Actually,
it's harder to do on video calls. It's much easier to do in person. But just having a sense of like, there's a space here. There is like a room full of people who are here on purpose with the adults who are in your meetings and whatnot.
Sure.
We're just going to go. As opposed to like, seems like we're all having side conversations. You can just wait. You can just like decide to go. But it does require like a certain relationship, a certain set of positioning, a certain like, if I were a junior developer, I wouldn't be able to get away with this. Whereas like right now, I'm a team lead. I'm a staff or principal engineer. Like I can, when we go around the room, we do our intros like, yes, I'm a principal engineer.
Right.
I will be in the delivery leads role for this project.
Immediately commands a little different respect.
Right. And so there's just and again, not to like be weird or hierarchical or like authoritarian about it.
Sure.
Because truly it is like way more fluid than I'm presenting, but like that, but being able to do that, honestly is like that, like being able to walk into a meeting and say, what is the biggest problem we need to solve right now?
Right.
What is our actual, like, what are the biggest problems? Is the problem that we don't have our problems well defined? Is what's the biggest thing that we need to figure out right now in this 45-minute block?
Sure. Because
otherwise we're just going to like, otherwise our action item is going to be to schedule a follow-up in 2 weeks and we're just going to repeat this whole cycle.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but like just, it's just, it takes time. I would bet that you're probably, because of the role that you're in, you're probably doing a lot of this already. But maybe not as consciously as you would have had to if you were like, all right, I don't know how to command a room, and I'm about to spend the next 4 days at a middle school.
Yeah, man,
Um,
that's like that's hard mode, right? I feel
oh
like
yeah, yeah.
I don't know what people think, but I feel like
Mhm.
middle and high school kids. That's just I can't imagine teaching to a harder group. I feel like college must be so much. Maybe not. I don't know, but I feel like in college, just like if you don't want to,
Mhm.
people who don't want to pay attention, whatever. But like kids, I don't know. I don't know how you do it. Like
It's
just the idea of managing that number of kids to begin with, let alone like actually
Mhm.
find a way to instruct them in something.
yeah,
That's it's mind blowing. So
yeah. It's hard. Also, it's learnable.
yeah,
Um,
that's true. That's a really good point. I feel like I just think of it as hard, but you're right. Many hard things, most hard things are learnable. You just gotta.
yeah, and this is kind of a core belief that I've got is that most people can get to be like average
Yeah,
at most skills have the potential to be average
yeah,
at
yeah.
most skills with enough time
Sure.
and with enough like practice and feedback and whatnot. And so this comes into like my some of my favorite projects are like what you said, where I get to be on a team, like coach and mentor and like help the team figure out how to do things.
Yeah.
And it isn't ever like, oh man, I need this team to be like way better.
Right.
What it usually is like I need this team to be like 5 to 12% better.
Yeah. Or just continuously improve. For me, it's like
Yeah,
let's learn how to improve and learn how to learn all those kinds of things.
Right. We don't need to all be rock stars. We don't need to all be 10x developers. My experience so far is that like a 10x developer just creates 10 times the extra work for their peers rather than like producing 10 times the. I mean, it's like 10 times the value. I know people who can like sit down and they're like, bam, we shaved a year off this project in an afternoon. I know people who have done things like that, but and none of them would describe themselves as 10x developers.
Sure.
Like, I don't know. I'm just here. I write code sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Pretty cool. I guess we're going to save some time on this project. Anyways, do you want to get lunch?
Yeah.
And so, like, I know people who do things like that, but a lot of, it's like even with the mentors, like taking an underperforming team and getting them to average is usually just like finding the low hanging fruit and picking it off.
Yeah.
It's removing systemic blockers. It is, or shoring up mechanical skills, as the case may be.
Yeah.
You got a team of devs who are like, oh crap, we're Ruby developers and we just inherited a Java code base. Oh crap. It's like, okay, well, let's figure out where the gaps are in our Java knowledge and we'll patch them.
Yeah. It's really, it really, everything has like just got to identify the problems, try to figure out how to solve them.
And getting just like incrementally better.
Yeah.
As you said.
I don't know, how are you doing on time, really quick?
Pretty fine. Okay. Probably 15 more minutes.
Yeah, gotcha. I wanted to ask you one last thing because I saw something that you posted on Twitter, but
I hit it.
But then we can wrap up because I really appreciate your time. This is awesome.
Oh, likewise. I'm glad we get to chat as opposed to like tweeting at each other periodically.
Yeah, exactly. No, you wrote something about like learning. What's and I was gonna put a word into your language, but like. I think you've been. I don't know. Man, I should have saved the tweet.
Let's try it.
Knowing about learning, like, or thinking about how to learn and stuff like that. Is this something you like? Are you been thinking about this?
Yeah, and so,
what's the word? There's a word in philosophy.
Maybe epistemology.
Epistemology.
That's like how do we know what we know?
Yeah, that's the word that came to my mind when I saw you post up. I don't know if that's sort of what you were thinking about, or is it different? It's
more just like the cognition. Okay. And whatnot. And what I mean by that is, in teaching, a really common model, and this is, you mentioned like crappy professors, is what they'll do is they will like, in today's session, I will describe topic, whatever it might be.
Sure.
The migration habits of ducks. I don't know. Yeah. Now that I have described this, you know it. And you are prepared to answer test questions in the final exam in 2.5 months. If you do not know it, it means you did not pay attention well enough, and you should revisit the recording of my lecture.
Right.
Right, and so there's which is like buried in so many issues, right? And you have some folks who are just very skilled presenters, and you can kind of get away with that,
Right.
and a bunch of folks who aren't.
Yeah.
Where then what you have is kind of swirling around in your brain is just a series of disconnected facts, and you have to spend a bunch of time kind of putting it all together.
Okay.
And so, but I see the same thing happening like in trainings, in documentation. We had this is the previous client. They were doing a tech stack switch, and this was before I came on the project. Their engineering manager at the time was like, "Let's go learn about Rails. Go do this course, and now you'll know Rails." And the course was just like reading and listening and watching rather than doing anything.
Yeah.
With no checkpoints, with no like, let's find out if you actually understand what's going on. Yeah, one way to understand is like, go write some code. And many of these folks were doing that. But they were also like doing this in their side time around writing a bunch of JavaScript, if I remember right. And so it just wasn't. So there wasn't a connection between like unless they were doing it on purpose, there weren't opportunities to like practice what they were doing.
Okay.
And then also, unless they were really doing it on purpose, there wasn't a connection between like the course and the code base that they were eventually going to inherit. And what ended up being like 9 months later.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, and what I was told was like, well, they went through this Rails training. I was like,
They must be
sure.
Yeah. They must
Okay.
completely experienced.
Did it work?
Yeah.
And so without any like notion of how it goes, and so we've been, but it's also just like there are hard limits to how much new stuff you can learn in a given day.
Yep.
And those hard limits vary based on like, are you in a domain that you already know?
Right.
How's your energy? Have you eaten enough? Things like that, right?
Sure.
But there are hard limits to how much you can learn in a given day and like expect to retain.
Yeah.
And there are hard limits to how much you can keep in your brain at any one time.
Yeah.
And so if we think about like the experience of working in a code base that you already know pretty well versus a new to you code base in a language that you know pretty well versus a new to you code base in a language that you don't know very well.
Okay.
And the code base that you know really well, if you need to go in and make a change, you're like, well, I know where that change probably needs to be.
Right.
I know the language. I can just go and do it.
Yeah.
And you just do it, right? You don't have to think super hard about it most of the time. Sometimes the problem itself is challenging enough that you have to like think hard about what a solution looks like.
Right.
But writing the code and putting it in the right spot is not usually the hardest part of that.
Right. No, not really.
Usually the more challenging part is like getting your stakeholders to tell you what you actually need.
Right. Identifying the problem and kind of figuring out the good solution for that.
Yeah. In code base where you know the language pretty well,
right,
but you don't know the code base super well, but you need to make like a similarly complex change.
Sure.
The relative to the one where you know the code base and the language really well, the question that you're asking is, okay, where does this functionality live?
Right.
Where should it live? What patterns already exist in the code base?
Right.
It seems like they're using GraphQL over here and REST over here, like a REST API over here and some live view. It's not. It seems like there's something like and also there's like regular controller rendered pages which render some React that consumes the GraphQL. Sometimes it's like untangling.
Sure.
But you know the language well enough, you know the patterns, you know like the broad architectural patterns well enough that you can say, well, this is a controller, so I know what it does. This is a live view, I know what it does. This is a GraphQL mutation or query or whatever, I know what it does.
Right.
I know what it looks like, I know what to expect. And so you can still make the change, but you're not going to be as fast.
Right.
And you're going to have to think harder about it.
Yeah. Right, because you can read it and understand it. And like you said, you have the pattern, so there's ability to understand even the larger abstractions. But of course, you don't know the code base. Okay.
And so in the first one, you know the code base, you know the patterns. The thing that's occupying like your mental bucket is what does a good solution look like?
Right.
And how will I know? How will I test it? Like what test do I need to write for this thing? Sure. Is there an edge case lurking in here that I'm not thinking about? Like those are like you're thinking about things that are intrinsic to the problem.
Yeah.
In the second case, or language you know pretty well, code base you don't. You're thinking about those things, and also where does it live?
Yeah.
What shape? Like what pattern
Right.
or what shape does it need to fall into? Does this code already exist in the code base and we just need to port it over or like make a reference to it
Right.
or call it or something like that?
Yeah.
Or do I need to make a new thing? Um, do I need to make other changes in response to this? And those are stuff that you just know if you were like in a code base you know pretty well. If you go that to like language that you don't know very well, then you have that same bigger set of questions along with, crap, I've got a list.
Yeah.
How do I iterate over a list in this language again?
Yeah.
Um,
Right. It's not even there's like an impedance
yeah.
to even get to the place that you're trying to get to. There's like an impedance. And also I feel like it's maybe it doesn't matter whether you know another programming language or not, but sometimes the impedance is more frustrating if you already know. You're like, how do you do this in this language? I feel like it's not matching to my expectation based on previous knowledge kind of thing.
Yeah. And that can sometimes happen. If like in a code base, this was Ruby code bases are really guilty of this, where there's just like some wild new pattern because the Ruby language lets you do literally anything you want.
Right.
And you're like, this is clearly Ruby, but I have no idea what's going on here. Somebody went wild with metaprogramming. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know. Between the metaprogramming and the macros and I don't even know what's going on.
Right.
And so that happens sometimes in like Ruby, where it's like, I know this language, but by golly, what does this code even do? Which is the thing that I appreciate most about Elixir is that it's a lot harder to get into that.
Sure.
So like get into like with Elixir, every once in a while I run into some code like, I don't know what this does. That's just a gap in my own knowledge, rather than like, wow, what was this programmer doing?
Right. What? Yeah. Or why are we? And then it's like, why are we reaching for this solution? I don't know if you try to get yourself in the mind of the person who was building this to maybe try to understand what the thing is doing. Because if you understand the intent.
But then if you go one step further, right? Yeah. Language you don't know very well. Code base you don't know very well. Potentially problem domain you don't know very well. It's more stuff that's in your brain, right?
Right.
And if you couple that with, is this a place where I need a list? Is this a place where I need, I don't know, could I do this with a string? Could I do this with a map?
Yeah.
Do we even do maps here? And like somebody who's like a bootcamp grad who just doesn't have, they're like, this is a clear place where I would use a key value pair or a key value store. Yeah. This is a clear place where I would use a list and then iterate out. Like they don't have those tools necessarily.
Sure.
And so you end up with just like even more, like just way more that they have to keep in their brains. And so a lot of the reading that I've been doing lately, and this is initially in the context of like just teaching and learning, but even more like, what does it take to make our code bases tractable?
Yeah, interesting.
Like we talk about like complexity and simplicity in like the rich hickey.
Yeah. Simple, not easy, or whatever.
Yeah. Or simple made easy.
Simple made easy. Yeah.
Simple made easy. I think is the classic. It's a brilliant talk.
Brilliant.
And Rich Hickey is so much smarter than I am. Like I would love to be able to write code and see code the way that he does, and I will never, honestly. But that's okay. And so the question. And so anyway, so getting to this, like, what does it take to make a code base tractable? I've been on teams where it's either a bunch of like senior developers who've been there for a million years or junior developers who've been there for like 8 months. And then no one who's been there between like 2 years and 7 years.
Yeah.
Where in those teams, just like knowing where everything is what makes you a senior developer.
Right.
So it isn't like knowledge of language, your ability to execute. It's just like, I know that bug. That shows up twice a year.
It's all the like...
You go and you adjust this flag in the thing, and then it's all fine.
Yeah, it's like the organism. I don't know if knowledge gained through time and experience. It's just like in that code base. But yeah,
right. But it's not transferable.
No,
necessarily. Exactly. Like you couldn't take those folks and be like, yes, you will perform at a senior level in another organization. Necessarily,
yeah.
Sometimes you can. Like plenty of like very very skilled engineers in those contexts, but a lot of like the way that you gain seniority in those types of organizations is just around long enough that you learn where all the stuff is.
Yeah.
But in our business, like consulting,
we're
not going to be on the same project for 8 years at a stretch.
Right.
It just isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
You may have like a client that's on again, off again over 8 years, but it's not going to be 8 continuous years.
Yeah.
It just it isn't. And so if you have the same client for 8 years at a stretch, you're not a consultant,
Yeah. Right.
right? You're just a contract employee.
Yeah. Right.
And so so the business changes, but so with that, right? So we do the work to like make our work more like to make those points of entry easier.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily consciously.
Yeah.
Sometimes consciously. I mean, probably more conscious than not. And we wrap it in like talk of best practices is what we do.
Sure. Right.
But just at oh man, when my code looks like this, it is a giant pain to make sense of later.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to need to look at this in like 9 months. And I know that there's going to be a 9-month gap between when I look at it and when I next look at it.
Yeah.
So what do I need to do to make this so I'm not just like shaking my fist at myself? I'm just like cursing. Yeah. Cursing wildly. And so it gets like that. And that's, and that's okay because then it can be like, what do I need to do to make sure that I can make sense of it?
Right.
And so I've been thinking, like, I don't know what this looks like, but thinking about like going even further, like what does it need to look like? What does this code base need to look like? Not just the code, but not just the code itself, like the artifacts around it, the way that we talk about things, the domain model, even, so that a pretty average developer can come in and make sense of it and be productive.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And what do our team processes need to be so that we can have a team of pretty average developers and be more than averagely successful?
Yeah, that's super interesting. Because it's interesting that you're thinking that, because I feel like you said it in passing, like we put sort of best practices, and I feel like those are tactical frequently, not always, but they're like tactical in nature. Like this is a thing that I can do in this small piece of code or something. It's tactical because it does help not just me in the future, but other developers who come in here.
And they're also super contextual.
Right.
Process best practices, code best practices, they're all super contextual.
Yeah. But
like
you're also
things that look good in one context, terrible in another. But go ahead. Sorry.
But you're also thinking, but you're thinking strategically, right? Like not just tactical, because I feel like that's learning the tactical stuff, like the rules of thumb, right? Like that's why the rules of thumb, because sometimes they don't apply, but like, that's sort of tactics to help you with that. But strategically, how do you address this sort of at a larger, I don't know if it's at a larger thing, but just having sort of a bigger strategy.
Well, it sometimes is a larger thing. Like if we're going in with a team, or if we're going into like a project with the goal of you're going to mentor and build up this team, then like we got to take the people as they are. We can't just be like, you're all canned. We're going to go hire some better developers. That's just
right. Yeah.
And certainly, if somebody's misbehaving wildly, then yes, certainly. But like somebody being average at their job is not. That's different.
That's
right?
normal.
And so
to be clear, being average, most people don't think they're average, but that's what an average means. So
it's just like within like that middle
average.
Like that middle standard deviation is what, like 40, 50, 60%? Or the middle couple of standard deviations in a normal distribution?
In a normal distribution, if it's normal,
That's a huge percentage.
Most everybody,
Right.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while you'll meet like those rare geniuses. Every once in a while you'll meet somebody who's just like wildly terrible.
Sure.
But most people that we meet are comfortably within the realm of average at a given domain.
Yeah, sure.
Like honestly, the way that I write code is I'm a staff engineer or a principal engineer, whatever I'm called. I write pretty readable code. Yeah. I write code that is usually not awful to change later.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, but usually not. But it's not that hard to find somebody who writes more interesting, like more elegant, more beautiful Ruby or Elixir or whatever than I do. It's not hard to find people who do that well, who can do that better than I do. It's really not hard to find people who like JavaScript better than I do. I write React all day. So, but it's really not hard to find people who do that better than I do.
Same.
But the thing that I do well, and the reason that I'm in like the role that I'm in, is when I'm working with clients, when I'm working with stakeholders, it's like, let's figure out what the real problem is.
Yeah.
So you ask me for a feature, You
I
asked me
want
for like
to
a button that you can push that
dig.
does a thing.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what the real problem is.
Yeah.
And in doing that, like I can sometimes like shave a month off of
Right.
what would otherwise be a much bigger problem by coming to a better definition.
Yep. Yeah.
Not always. Everyone, like once a year, I can do
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Sometimes they understand the problem really well. Sometimes they don't. Right. It's like they have a predetermined solution, and maybe it's just not. It's not really it's not addressing the core
right.
problem.
And we can, and then I write code well enough to bring that to fruition.
Sure.
But not in a way that like really good developers look at and say, "Oh, dang, that's good. That's good."
That's some sweet
that is like
code.
Beautiful Ruby.
Yeah, that's
like,
beautiful code.
Nobody looks at my code and does that. What they look at my code is they look at most of the time. Folks look at my code and say, "Yeah, I see what's going on here.
Yeah, which is good. That's what we want.
This is all readable."
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah, none of it is artistic. None of it is particularly beautiful. But like, and so knowing though that we have like limited amounts of stuff that we can keep in our head. So we talked about like those the different project categories.
Yeah.
Per cognitive load theory, you've got about 4 buckets that you can keep in your cognition at one time.
Okay.
And so like the buckets can expand or contract. If you're thinking, if your mental model is like, I need to build a feature that's probably going to require that I write a GraphQL mutation, and it's going to need to be able to define a new type and do some stuff on the back end, maybe build a new table, but I know how to do all those things. Yeah. All that fits in one bucket.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I need to build this feature, and I should figure out how that even happens. GraphQL, maybe? Yeah. Is this a query? Is it a mutation? Is it something else? Should I build a controller endpoint? I don't know. And then, wait a second, how does this even work?
Yeah.
I need to define a type. Oh man, what are these types doing?
Yeah, what is this in this language? Yeah, right.
I bet I'm going to have to write a mutation because I don't think this table exists. Time to go look at the docs and figure out, or not a mutation, a migration.
Sure.
I think I need a migration. I don't know. Can I get away with just like editing the SQL dump directly and then reloading?
You start putting stacks in your head. You call them buckets, right? You said 4 buckets. Mm-hmm. Cognitive. What did you call cognitive?
It's cognitive load theory.
Cognitive load theory. I'll have to look that up.
And so and what it comes down to is like the more mechanically fluent we are with something, like a domain, the more we know about something, whether it's like mechanical skills or domain knowledge or something else, the easier, like the bigger a given bucket can be.
Okay, it's not like you don't use that bucket. It's not like it doesn't qualify as a bucket. You can have more of a bucket. Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's just like a model for thinking about it rather than like literal buckets.
Yeah.
It's just a model for thinking about it, but it's but it's the difference between like somebody who knows their language and code base really well versus somebody who maybe doesn't.
Yeah. It's
just the person who knows the language and code base very well can take on a bigger chunk of work at once.
Interesting.
They can hold like more in their head at once because it's all like kind of been pre-organized in your brain.
Yeah.
And then I'll bring it all the way back around to the start. So tennis, right? Tennis is a game where, and this is why I find it so intriguing sometimes, the less thinking you do, the better. Oh. But also you still have to do some thinking.
It's got to become second nature?
So there's like the automaticity to it. And so it's like, can I groove my forehand or my backhand or my serve or whatever so that it works without me having to think about it?
Right.
Because if I have to think about my shot, I'm not thinking about where I need to go right after. I'm not thinking about, what I'm going to do with it. I'm just like trying to get the ball back over the net.
Right.
Or if I have an opponent who can take time away from me by just hitting harder, hitting angles that make me like run farther, anything like that, then I have to think a lot more. And I have to make conscious, deliberative decisions a lot faster as opposed to just kind of hitting a groove where I can be mostly reflexive.
Yep.
Which is like, I'm just going to hit the ball, move to the right spot, hit the ball, move to the right spot, hit the ball, move to the right spot. Oh, here's one that I can attack. Now I can think, I'll move forward, and the point.
That's fascinating. Right. It frees your brain. I don't know if freeing is the right word, but it frees your brain to think about the things you need to think about, right? And it's like, and the rest of it is sort of an autopilot in your brain. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, I know Elixir pretty well. I can work with the basic data structures. I can like do stuff. I can write my code. I can write my methods. And I don't have to look up a whole lot.
Yeah.
There are still things like every time I look at enum reduce, I don't remember the order of those arguments.
Yeah. I think. I think I figured it out. As you pass the things and the accumulator, the initial value. So it's always
it's your numerable, the accumulator, then the function, and I think there's like the
function takes the value and then the accumulator. I think because it's in the same order as the pass. Anyway, that's.
That's a good mnemonic. Yeah. That's the thing I keep having to look up. It's like, okay, is it the accumulator and the value, or the value and the accumulator?
Yeah. So I think it's the same order in which you pass it at the beginning. You got to pass the anyway. But I think that's it.
And so that's a great mnemonic. So I have to look that up every time, but I don't have to look up how reduce works.
Right. You understand I understand reduce. Just how did Elixir implement the order of the elements? Yeah.
And it's just and there's a couple there are a couple of methods that have like similar but slightly different names in Ruby and Elixir. I've been writing mostly Ruby for the last couple of years.
Okay.
But I write enough Elixir that it's like still fresh, and I'm like, oh man, is that the Ruby name or is that the Elixir name? I'm just gonna go look. Gonna go look it up. Or more often, it's like I'm just gonna write my test and then see if it fails. Or see if I get an exception.
Sure.
And so that relative to means that my brain is free to sort of think about the problem.
Yeah.
And if I know the code base pretty well, then like the question of like where does this go? Well, I know the answer to that.
Sure.
Or at least I know a good enough answer for right now, and then I can think harder about it later if I figure out that that's not the right way. But it frees me to like think about like the core of the problem, as opposed to, well, guess we're all just going to go learn some Rust today.
Yeah.
Which I know enough that I can read, but I don't know enough that I can write. With any expectation of success.
But bringing it back to the tennis example was really helpful actually, because it actually the notion that you like can go in automatic, you know, in certain things, like, but applying it to the code, that actually makes a ton of sense, because you free space to focus on the problem at hand, which means you don't have to worry about all these other things that you would have to otherwise.
You get the sense of flow, right? Yeah. You get the sense of flow.
Yeah. Just golden. Andrew, I have taken far more in time than I should have from you. I really appreciate it.
Joy, sir. This is an absolute joy.
But yeah, thank you for being so generous with your time, and we'll have to do it again.
Please, anytime.